In the run-up to the elections, when you went out campaigning for people's votes, you've talked about several different things that you want to happen for Thiruvananthapuram. One is the Virinyam port. The other one is trying to convert the city into education, a center for education, twinning it with a global city. Several different things that you'd like to do. What would you put on priority? How would you prioritize these now that you are MP for Thiruvananthapuram?
See, I think an MP, frankly, can't just cherry pick one or two. You really have to do this across the board.
Correct.
In other words, I'll be pursuing 10 issues at the same time while I'm in Delhi, and then when I go back, I'll have to deal with all of them. But having said that, I think the first priority for any new MP today must be to try and shake loose a number of the pending files in Delhi, because too many of these issues have essentially been stuck for years, in some cases for decades. There's a national highway project, for example, which has not budged for 39 years. There is the Virinyam port thing, which has been hanging fire for a long time. There are drinking water projects financed by the World Bank and so on that have not moved, that have not produced a drop of drinking water, and people need it, and so on and so forth. So I think one general priority is go to every relevant ministry, knock on every door, thump on every desk and say, can we find out where the logjam is, why haven't things moved, what's the problem? And if it turns out that they say, look, Delhi is not the problem is back in the home state, then go back to the home state and pursue it there.
You have said that even when you're in Delhi, you'll have an office open in the constituency 6 days a week so that people can be in touch with you. There is also a fear where the constituency is concerned that Shashi Tharoor may end up being a globe-trotting MP because of perhaps the role that he will get in government, either in the External Affairs Ministry, perhaps even in the Prime Minister's office. How would you see yourself being able to balance the responsibilities then as an MP and of a minister if that were to happen?
Anuradha, first of all, I have been given a job by the voters of Thiruvananthapuram, and that is a job to represent them in Delhi, to make sure their voice is heard in Parliament, and to get things done from here that will benefit them there. That's the job of every MP, and to me that's the primary obligation of a Member of Parliament. And putting it very bluntly in political terms, if you don't do that, you can't expect to be re-elected. So essentially that remains a challenge, whatever else the party and the government may or may not ask me to do. And they may ask me to do something, they may not. But if they do, I'll have to do that in addition to this. In other words, I simply cannot afford to neglect my constituency. And that's something that I believe in our parliamentary system, every government understands, that its ministers have to be frequently back in their home districts, because that's where people need to see them at work. Whereas there is also a job, of course, to be done in Delhi. And this challenge, I mean, I've often been called an adroit multitasker. This is going to challenge my multitasking abilities, but I'm going to try and do that.
But you are looking forward to an executive role, to be able to use all the experience you've had at the UN in a direct executive role for the government of India.
That is not in my hands, so there's no point looking forward to something. I often joke that a good rule in life is never to accept or reject a gift you haven't been offered. If it is, I will certainly relish it, and if it's not, I have enough to do.
I want you to go back a little bit to the bid to be the Secretary General of the United Nations, the bid that you lost out. It's a fact that the USA didn't support your bid to be Secretary General. And one of the things, it seems, that was said at that point was that you didn't have the political experience in a national government.
Speaking for me, for myself, I don't think that at any stage with a significant number of voters, that is a significant number of governments, that lack of national experience was an overriding consideration. Kofi Annan, after all, had no national experience. He too had been an Under-Secretary General of the UN when he was candidate, and not only had he won, but he had excelled in the job. He had essentially been elected to fulfill the second African term. Boutros Ghali had one term, and Kofi Annan was meant to have the second. He did so well, he was given, if you like, a second personal term and therefore a third African term. And that was a very high standard that he'd set. So I don't think that that could have been a significant argument.
I think in India we tend to react emotionally every time India is aspiring for recognition or validation at the world stage. How upset do you think we should be or have been about that, one? And where is India today in the scheme of things? You know, we get very excited when we see Dr. Manmohan Singh with Barack Obama. Try and explain the Indian psyche to us from your perspective.
I'm not sure I totally, but I think we do perhaps sometimes prize external approval simply because we seem to see ourselves reflected in others' eyes and are gratified by that. And that may be a trait in the national character that we can afford to overcome. But at the same time, one can
That's
also
being
say
very diplomatic.
No, but one can also say the opposite. There are some foreigners who feel that we are too self-assured, we're too independent, that we're too careless of other people's views, that we're too preachy, and so you get both sides, both aspects of our psyche being analysed. You picked one, but some critics will pick the other, so both exist. On the question of my own election, I want to stress that in no way should India feel that this was about India. I would genuinely say that the very administration that vetoed me was an administration that had worked closely with our government to give us the Indo-US nuclear deal, which was a huge thing for the country. And I think in many ways that is a fairer reflection of President Bush's admiration for India.
Technically, does the opportunity arise several years later if you were to be External Affairs Minister and then, like Ban Ki-moon, who was South Korean Foreign Minister?
See, the fact is, Anuradha, that there is an informal understanding that the post will rotate amongst continents.
That's true.
So if Ban Ki-moon gets the usual 2 terms, the next will be a turn of a European, and there'll be a bit of a squabble between Western Europe, which says it's overdue. Its last one was Waldheim in the early 70s, and Eastern Europe, which will argue they've never had it. And until they solve that out, the idea will be it'll be a European.
So I am getting ahead of myself.
Yes,
Way
I
ahead
think the
of
next
myself.
Asian will be 40 years from now. So let's hope that one of our very, very young, aspiring internationalists can look for that 40 years from now.
Shashi Tharoor, I want to go back to your relationship with the Congress leadership. I talked about the Great Indian Novel. Now, in the Great Indian Novel, it's clearly your take and very, very creative take on Indian politics, especially leading up to the emergency and after. In fact, your protagonist correlating to the Mahabharat's Duryodhan is Priya Duryodhani, and we all know who that is. Does it cause any awkwardness today when the Gandhi family is leading the party that you represent?
Not really, because I was writing about a particular historical period that is now, as I said, 20 years ago, and I can tell you very honestly that those who were not particularly keen on my entry into the party took care to sort of photocopy relevant pages of my previous writings and circulate them, and both the leader, the chairperson of the UPA, and Rahul Gandhi said that they read my writings and they have absolutely no problem. They're happy that someone of my independent views sees his place in the Congress party. And the truth is, if you look at my writings and my columns, and I've been very trenchant in my views on everything, but for the last several years, well before politics was even a gleam in my eye, you will find that I've had nothing negative to say about the policies of the Congress party and the UPA government. I have frankly been an unabashed admirer of Manmohan Singh and his leadership of the government, and I have been very impressed with the political leadership of the Congress party. So to refight the battles of the emergency when we have been focusing on the elections of 2009 is rather pointless. That was a generation ago. Today, the Congress party is in no way a threat to democracy, as it arguably was during the emergency.
So you stand by what you said when you said it and about the period you said it of?
Absolutely. I mean, I said that the emergency was the seminal event in my own political maturation, that I realized how important democracy was not something you could lightly take for granted. And having started off as a defender of the emergency and become disillusioned by it, I stand strongly by my views about that period. Having said that, that is, as I said, a good matter of 34 years ago. Today, in 2009, the Congress party has been the best guarantor of India's democracy and of India's pluralism. We are facing a turbulent time in the world economy. The Congress has been the best steward of it. We have a tough neighborhood, dangers coming across the borders. The Congress has been mature and astute in the way it's handled it. So for me today, it was a no-brainer in deciding, when to go into politics, which party I should go and join or consider the independent route. I didn't hesitate for a second. This was the party with which, beyond any hesitation, I felt I belonged, and that most thinking Indians ought to belong.
Shashi Tharoor, thank you for your time. Does it mean that though now the columns, we can't look forward to the weekly columns?
No, I stopped my columns when I entered politics, and the truth is that writing requires not just time, it requires a space inside your head to think, to reflect, to create an alternative way of looking at things. And at this stage, I find it difficult to read, let alone to write, just the space in one's day to be able to do that.
But we are happy you're occupied the way you've chosen to be. So all the very best. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.